Okay, hi guys. We're going to get started on this landscape drawing. I've got my camera right here behind me over my shoulder, and I'll try and talk to you guys a little bit while we're working and explain what I'm doing with each step of the way. Hopefully we can try and keep this video not too long. I found that I really much prefer my phone camera. My Canon is very high quality, very high definition, and it is not very friendly to my 48-year-old face. So I like the way this looks. So we're going to start out on a landscape, and usually whenever you start out, and if you heard a little clearer, say hi, Kinley.
Hi.
That's my great niece. We're babysitting her. Mom's a nurse and a very busy lady right now. So we're going to start on this landscape, and whenever we start a landscape, we want to make sure that we know where our horizon line is going to be. Our horizon line is our split between ground and sky, so we know which is which. So we know where everything sits within our picture plane. Our paper is our picture plane, remember that? So what we're going to do is you want to avoid the center of your paper whenever you do a landscape. That automatically makes it look boring and kind of stale and stagnant. So we're going to scoot it up, and I'm going to be drawing a lot darker than you should draw because I'm going to be using a very dark pencil, and I want it to show up on camera. So remember, draw light. So I'm going to start out with my horizon line. It's okay that it's not straight because the ground is not perfectly straight unless you're in Kansas. And then I'm going to add some little lumpy hills back here. They could be hills, they could be trees off in the distance that are very far away. That's just up to you what you decide to do with that. Then I'm going to be creating a barn right here, and I'm going to start out with the corner of my barn. I'm going to make it go just a little bit above my hills. And then I'm going to create another line for the back wall, and I'm going to make it a little bit higher up on my page. And then I'm going to have another one right here. Now these are all lines that you would eventually use a ruler with, but I'm using a very small piece of paper, so that doesn't really matter. Then I'm going to create the bottom wall, and it has to slant. We're using a little bit of perspective here. So it's going to slant slightly uphill, and this one is also. So make sure that they slant. Compare it with the top of your paper to see if it's slanting enough. Then I'm going to start working on my barn roof, and I'm going to make this a little bit of an interesting roof, and they have to slant as well. So they're slanting this way. You might even hear my son in the background playing Fortnite in his room. Sounds like it's not going too well. Then I'm going to create another little slight change in pitch right here. The angle of roof is called pitch, like pitching a ball. And then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to kind of follow along with the same idea. Now, if I'm moving too fast, you can always pause these videos and fix that little angle right there. You can always pause these videos anytime you want. I might move this out just a little bit too. Notice I'm kind of making some fixes as we go. My pencil's very dark, so erasing is not really much of an option. And I'm going to try and erase a little bit with my kneaded eraser. Kind of get that distracting line. I've got an example below me that I drew, but it was on much bigger paper. So, okay. Now we're going to create a road that is going to our barn. So I'm going to start way over here, just above this corner. Then I'm going to make it look like it goes behind my barn. Now my next line is going to, all of these lines are going to go at a slant. Kind of whenever you're going down a road and you look ahead and it looks like the road goes like this. It's not really getting narrower as you go. It just appears to from the standpoint of perspective. And this will make our work look more 3D. So next I'm going to plant another line right there. Notice it's wider down here and narrower up here as we go. And then I'm just going to go straight across. And this is going to be kind of the lot for my barn, where people could park their equipment, where you could create a pen for an animal, that kind of thing. I live on a farm, so familiar. Then we're going to put a little tree right here. And I'm just going to keep it simple at first. I'm just going to do a Y and kind of make sure that the base of your trunk is wider. It gets a little bit narrow. And this is all we're going to worry about for now with our tree. We'll add more to it, but we're not going to do that right at this minute. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my door on my barn, a large door, and then like a smaller door over here for a person to go through. We call it a people door around here. Ooh, interesting technical farm name. So I'm going to put a little door right here. Remember that the sides of your doors and windows have to go straight up and down because the edges of your building are straight up and down. But the top will slant slightly. If it's below the middle, it'll slant with the floor of this wall here. If it was above the middle, it would slant slightly up. This one's going to be above middle over here, this large door. So it's going to slant slightly up. Now make sure that your vertical lines for the edges of your doors and the corners of your building are straight up and down. And you can see by comparing with my pencil and looking at the edge of my paper, they're straight up and down. They're pretty close. They're pretty good. And same thing with my fence posts. My fence posts are going to have to be straight vertical. I see all the time as kids make their fence posts that they end up laying them down like this as they go, and we don't want that. It'll look more like railroad tracks or something that's lying on the ground rather than a fence that is standing. So we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that they are vertical, straight up and down, and they get a little bit taller as they get closer to us. They're not really getting taller. They are closer to us, so they appear larger naturally. And then we're going to create the top. And if you're using slightly bigger paper than I am, then you can go ahead and like thicken up your posts, you know, add to them, make them a little bit more like wooden posts, unless you're making them more like metal T-posts. Then you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to do the same thing over here. This part's easy peasy because it is a straight shot. And then these, just remember, straight up and down. Compare them to the edge of your paper. My eyes water really bad. Okay, and then we're going to go across the top. Remember, you can always tweak and make changes after you're done or as you go. If you don't like the way it turned out and you have extra paper, you can always, Kelly's got, we both have allergies right now because the wood stove is running in the wood furnace in the basement. You can always go through and make changes by tracing your old drawing with a piece of paper over the top of it. Just make sure that if you do that, you draw dark enough that you can see through your paper. Then I'm just going to create some little textures on my barn to make it look like it's got boards on it for siding. And you want to erase these lines if you can. I don't know if mine will erase because this is a 9B pencil, which means it's very soft, a lot of graphite, very little clay, because pencils are made out of clay and graphite. And if there's a lot of graphite, they draw very darkly. If there's a lot of clay, then they don't have very much graphite, and you get a nice pointy tip on them. Like for example, here's what this 9B looks like. And then here's what a H looks like. So you can tell H stands for harder, B stands for blacker. The French came up with the scale. It would have put an S for softer, but since this is harder, but that's the French. So they were the ones who came up with this scale. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop my tree just a little bit more. I'm going to put some little branches out here. Remember, don't get thorns. Don't get branches that look like big, wide traffic cones and thorns. And then I'm going to add a little bit of greenery around. I don't want to make it too perfectly globy. I'm kind of running out of space in the corner of my paper. I'm going to try and erase a little bit right there. From here, you can do anything else that you want with it. You can add some stuff in the foreground. You can add some stuff in the background. make it more interesting. I'm going to put some power poles because I find those interesting. I don't know why. I think the verticalness of the power poles helps balance how horizontal this composition is, which is why I kind of like it. And so I'm going to add some nice vertical power poles back here, put little T's on them. And then I'm going to loop some power lines. Plus, the looping power lines is a nice contrast with all of the structural things that we have going on right now. Technically, this would be still called a landscape because the majority of it is land with only a small bit of building. If it was a town or a city, that would be different. But this is a landscape that is mostly about the land, so that's why we call it a landscape. Now I'm going to move on to my colored pencil application. Whenever I choose my colored pencils for my background, I want to keep these areas back here. They need to be grayer or bluer than the rest, which will create what's called atmospheric perspective, which is making it look like that it's very far away. And they call it atmospheric perspective because the atmosphere is between us and what we're looking at. So we're having to look through all that air, all that dirt, all the little water particles that are in the air, that light's bouncing off, that keeps it from being as clear. Plus our own eyes, we can't focus on something that far away. So everything looks a little bit dusky and blue, and it doesn't look as clear. So I'm going to make those into trees instead of hills. I'm going to make it look like there's a big bunch of trees pretty far off. Hopefully my head wasn't in the way of my other camera too much while I was drawing. And I'm going to add, right now this is called blocking in. Notice as I'm coloring, I'm just barely twitching my fingers. I'm not using large hand movements. Even if my paper is big, I follow this rule about not using large hand movements. Points where you drag your pencil very rapidly and it creates a dark spot that creates this big drag mark, kind of like dragging your finger through frosting on a cake. It's hard to cover that up. Plus, if you're putting a lot of pressure on your pencil, then it's also hard if you make any dents or valleys in your paper by pushing so hard and you want to change something. You've created this dent in your paper, kind of like pushing your thumb into a slice of bread, and you can't get rid of that. So I'm going to go through. I'm working much more rapidly than I normally would because we're already at 12 minutes. So I'm just going to show you on this one little section right here. We're just going to develop this one little section. So now I'm going to take a little bit of blue and I'm going to go over it with a little bit of blue to tone it down. And then I'm even going to cover it with a little bit of gray. And then we're going to blend it. So I'm going to pause for a second and I'll be back in a minute. Here we go again. Phone rang. So I've gone and done my hills and now I'm going to work on my sky, and I'm just going to pick a light color. I tend to not pick stereotypical blue or stereotypical green or like the straight out of the tube colors. Nature doesn't really exist like that, so I try to mix it up and layer it up as much as I can. So you're going to do your sky any way that works for you. You can make it a sunset if you want. I'm just doing a blue sky. Like I said, I'm kind of trying to hurry. I would like this video to be around 20 minutes. So far the first one was 12, so the first time I paused. Okay, so next I'm going to do my grass, and I'm using a green. And whenever you do grass, I always shade vertically. I go up and down because that's the direction that grass grows. So if you go side to side, it doesn't seem very natural. And this can kind of help with the texture of the grass to make it look more like grass. and I'm just keeping my marks kind of short because it's in the distance. Now once I would get up here, I might make my marks a little bit taller, like that. Or I might change this to a different type of grass entirely. I might make it a little bit more yellow if I wanted to. I usually tend to make my greenery and my trees a different color than the green on my grass. That will separate them a little bit more so that I have lots of different greens going on. They're all not the same green. And if you don't have any colors, enough variety that you can do that, you can layer different colors. You can layer yellow on top of your green, you can layer blue on top of your green, you can layer brown on top of your green, and that will give you a lot of different results. So I'm going to pause this now and I'm going to finish this so you can see what the finished example looks like. So you don't have to sit through watching the whole thing. Okay, we're back after I finished my drawing. It's very simple. Normally I would blend it and smooth it a little bit more, but this is close enough and gives you a general idea. I don't have any shadows on it. If you do include shadows on yours, make sure that you know where your light direction is coming from and keep your shadows consistent. You don't want to have one shadow under your barn over here and then have the shadow of your tree going a different direction. Figure out where your light is coming from and make all the shadows consistent if you do put shadows on your drawing. So, good luck, have a good time, and Kinley, can I borrow yours real quick? Show them how far you got. My niece was following along as I was doing the video. So this is my second grade niece's version of it. She did an awesome job following along. So pause the video as many times as you need to, rewind and try again, or if you want to try a different drawing in a similar style, have a good time with it.